Welcome back to TV Education Timor. Here again with me, Dirce Lilifania in the Voice of American News. Today, I'll give you last week information from all around the world. Well, let's begin the news for today. Showing conviction in Floyd death prompts soul searching in France. The trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin made headline news in France. Lisa Bryan for VOA, Bobigny, France.
1. Unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony. Find the defendant guilty.
Derek Chauvin's trial for the killing of African-American George Floyd made headline news in France, but much of the reporting about the proceedings and their underlying themes of police violence and racism largely zoomed in on the United States.
I think it's viewed as an American problem with some resonance in France. It also feeds into a certain strain of French anti-Americanism on the left and on the right, so that the French can moralize about the United States and its difficulties and its flaws.
Floyd's death in police custody caused many French to look inward. Last year, they joined global protests for police accountability. Many chanted the name of 24-year-old Adama Traoré, whose family says he died under similar circumstances to Floyd, although that claim is disputed. The Black American's death opened a broader spigot here of soul-searching about France's colonial past and continuing injustices today. French authorities found zero tolerance for police racism and brutality and promised to ban a controversial police chokehold. President Emmanuel Macron called racial profiling unbearable. Police representatives deny there is systemic racism. They say police are overworked and underappreciated as they tackle violence in tough neighborhoods, sometimes becoming targets of terrorism.
The National Police is not racist. To the contrary, it's Republican and diverse, from all ethnic origins and religions. There may be problematic individuals, but the force itself isn't racist.
Critics say otherwise. A 2017 report by an independent citizens' rights body found young Black or Arab-looking men in France are 5 times more likely to be stopped for police identity checks than the rest of the population. Last November saw 4 Paris police officers suspended after TV footage showed them punching a Black music producer. In January, 6 non-governmental groups announced the country's first class action lawsuit over alleged racial profiling by police.
We've been struggling with the state for 10 years. The French Supreme Court convicted the state in November 2016 for discrimination. And after that, we could have expected from the state who should actually respect the rule of law to do some police reform. They have done nothing.
It's a story heard many times before in France. Activists point to bigger, long-standing inequalities going far beyond policing. Some aren't waiting for change from the top. In the Paris suburb of Bobigny, youth group Nouvel Élan 93 is mentoring youngsters, helping them with schoolwork and giving them alternatives to the streets where they are vulnerable.
On veut essayer de faire en sorte que
we are trying to push them to reach the maximum of their potential because many of them are talented in sports, music, theater, everything.
Cases of police violence are taken personally.
Mais en fait, ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que ce genre de choses n'arrive pas qu'aux autres.
These kind of things don't just happen to others, they could happen to us as well. I'm Black, I'm affected. There is a close relationship here in values between the protest for George Floyd and for Adama Traoré.
He and other activists say it will take time for the lessons from Floyd's death and France's colorblind creed of liberty, equality, and fraternity to take hold. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Bobigny, France.
United States drawdown from Afghanistan now underway. After 20 years, the finally U.S. drawdown of troops from Afghanistan has begun, marking a watershed moment for both countries.
Pentagon officials say the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan is now underway, with some equipment being packed up and shipped out. U.S. President Joe Biden has acknowledged serious security concerns, but says U.S. troops cannot remain in Afghanistan indefinitely.
We degraded the terrorist threat of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and after 20 years of valor, and sacrifice, it's time to bring those troops home.
State Department has sought to reassure Afghans that the United States remains committed to the country.
The only military presence that will remain in Afghanistan is the very limited presence required to protect our embassy. And that's important for the reason I was just discussing. Even as we disengage militarily from 20 years of military involvement in Afghanistan, our presence on the ground will remain through our embassy, through our civilian representatives, including our diplomats.
Reminds some analysts of the last U.S. troops leaving Vietnam in 1973, a watershed moment for both countries.
I think there must be many Afghans, particularly Afghans in urban Kabul, particularly women professionals in Kabul, who do to a degree believe that the United States has made certain commitments and now it's cutting and running. It's a very difficult moment for U.S. foreign policy, as was our departure from Vietnam.
Other experts point out that when it comes to assigning responsibility for failing to help Afghanistan become a secure, flourishing democracy, there is plenty of blame to go around.
This is a long and significant investment that has not paid off, but others in the region have also not brought about peace in Afghanistan. To the contrary, they have continued to play a variety of other games. Afghans' own political leaders have not come together in unity or found a means to negotiate peacefully with one another in ways that would bring about a stable country.
Many Afghan women say they dread a possible return to power of the Taliban once foreign troops are gone, and say they will fight to hold on to their hard-won rights. When the Taliban ruled Afghanistan in the late 1990s, women were barred from participation in public society, including going to school and work outside the home, and some women were executed for alleged adultery. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
U.S. weight losing vaccine patents to help global COVID fight. United States remains non-committal on an October 2020 proposal by India and South Africa to waive certain provisions to the World Trade Organization agreement. Pasti Widakoswara for VOA News.
Desperate Indians wait in line for vaccinations as the country's coronavirus crisis deepens, with the daily death toll climbing above 3,600.
We are searching oxygen all over India, all over Delhi, to Chandigarh, Ludhiana, Haridwar, Jaipur, and all our nearby cities.
In October 2020, at the World Trade Organization, India and South Africa proposed the so-called TRIPS waiver, which would allow countries to make generic versions of the vaccine. The proposal continues to languish without backing from the European Union and the United States. 100 million Americans have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. But speaking on board Air Force One on Friday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said President Joe Biden still has not decided on vaccine patent waivers.
Our overall objective is to provide as much supply to the global community and do that in a cost-effective manner.
Waiver proponents, including the progressive wing of Biden's Democratic Party and humanitarian organizations, say that it could be a game changer in the global fight against the pandemic.
I think the TRIPS waiver is one of the critical tools that can empower government to address the current situation of scarcity of supply.
But the administration is also under pressure from pharmaceutical companies who say that rather than waiving patents, the quickest way to help countries in need is by accelerating existing production lines and donating doses. An intellectual property waiver would not help accelerate COVID-19 vaccine access or address the very real supply chain and logistical constraints, an industry spokesperson told VOA. Even Bill Gates, the billionaire philanthropist and driving force behind COVAX, the UN mechanism to improve low and middle income countries' access to vaccines, is against waiving patents.
It makes very little sense. And this is a mistake on his part. And sometimes we should listen to billionaires when it comes to things on global health, but sometimes we really shouldn't. And this is one where we don't want to listen.
To reduce global vaccine inequity, Gates is instead pushing for technology transfer, where the private sector invests in new manufacturing capacity and shares know-how with emerging economies. He spoke at the Munich Security Conference in February.
Part of the way to solve that inequity is to get factories in India up in full speed. That's already happening with AstraZeneca. It'll happen with two of the others. And to get the financing.
The proposal to waive vaccine patent is supported by more than 80 WTO members, 60 former heads of states, and 100 Nobel Prize winners. It will again be in focus at the WTO General Council meeting on May 5th. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Venezuela, Iran strengthening alliance to evade sanctions. Iran and Venezuela have managed to maintain their commercial relationship despite UN sanctions. Cristina Caicedo, VOA News, Washington.
Hidden from radars and with vessel tracking systems off, the Iranian oil tanker Forest makes its way into a Venezuelan port.
Sí, el Forest llegó con el localizador apagado.
Yes, Forest arrived with a locator turned off. This way it is not detected internationally. It arrived at Alphalito refinery. It discharges around 270,000 barrels of gasoline.
Iván Freites Chirinos has worked for Petróleo de Venezuela, which is the Venezuelan state-owned oil and natural gas company, for more than 35 years. As a member of the Workers' Union, he is aware of the ongoing arrival of oil tankers to Venezuelan ports. Online tanker trackers and other independent vessel services also report the commercial exchange. The Forest is also used to transport jet fuel from Venezuela to other countries, such as Malaysia, and receives other types of fuel.
The cost of jet fuel is lower than the price of gasoline. They also bring in alkylate gas in the tankers. We don't produce that in Venezuela anymore. We used to have the infrastructure, but it's been destroyed and dismantled.
Both Iran and Venezuela are under U.S. sanctions. In 2020, the Trump administration reported the seizure of 4 Iranian tankers carrying petroleum cargo to Venezuela in violation of U.S. sanctions. Even though the sanctions are still in place, officials say Iran and Venezuela appear to be continuing their trade relationship. In a statement, the State Department said, "We are aware of reports from a Venezuelan and Iranian oil exchange and continue to monitor the situation." The Biden administration says the current sanctions will remain in effect as it conducts a comprehensive review of U.S. policy towards Iran. But critics say the administration isn't doing enough to stop sanctions defying trade between Tehran and Caracas.
There hasn't been a systematic, sustained, aggressive targeting of shipments by search and seizure by the U.S. Navy as Iranian tankers are in international waters in the North Atlantic heading to the Caribbean.
Ottolenghi says Iran is sharing knowledge with Venezuela about how to evade sanctions. Chirinos isn't sure the relationship with Iran is good for Venezuela.
What Iran is doing is taking advantage of the situation. It charges us 20 times more of the cost of the product and fixes the problem we have, not the problem for us, regular Venezuelans, the problem the military and the Cubans have regarding the situation in Venezuela and its national oil industry.
And the way Venezuela paid its debts, according to reports from the United States government and analysts, is with gold, the mineral coltan, and other natural resources.
We have the right to trade freely in the seas of the world, in the skies of the world between us, between Iran and Venezuela, to exchange products, to buy products from us, to sell products to us.
While the new Biden administration considers options regarding sanctions against Iran and Venezuela, Iran has resumed air shipments of materials designed to revive and improve the country's dormant fuel production facilities. Cristina Caicedo Smith, VOA News, Washington.
After 16 months closure, DC Building Museum opens with exhibit on fighting disease spread.
After being closed for 16 months due to renovations and the COVID-19 pandemic, the National Building Museum has reopened with a new look and some new exhibitions.
We have been open for one weekend only so far. We are limiting our hours and our days. We're only open Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 11 to 4, and it was crowded in here this weekend.
To celebrate its opening, the museum has launched 2 new exhibitions. One of them is dedicated to Mass Design Group, an organization that creates projects to help fight diseases like TB, cholera, and Ebola.
They found that by sort of creating as much outdoor space as possible in their design of these healthcare centers, they really help reduce the risk of disease transmission. Also, it's part of their design is allowing lots of good airflow and lots of ventilation and opportunities for sunlight and views and accessibility to nature.
The second exhibition is a memorial project honoring victims of gun violence in the US. It also was created by Mass Design in collaboration with artist Hank Willis Thomas and the Every Town for Gun Safety Fund, the largest nonprofit campaigning against gun violence in America.
58% of the American population has been directly impacted, or someone they love has been impacted by gun violence. So it's a lot of people. And we, for years, had been interested in the concept of a memorial because it is obviously it's a way to commemorate these lives that have been taken.
The memorial consists of 4 houses, each made of 700 glass blocks to honor the lives of those who died from gun violence.
The glass house, which is, the United States, where we are often pointing fingers and maybe throwing rocks at the problems of other countries, but not really aware of the vulnerability of our own society.
In 2020, gun violence killed nearly 20,000 Americans, according to data from Gun Violence Archive. An additional 24,000 people died by suicide with a gun. The exhibition will be open until September 25, 2022 and is free for visitors. Maxim Moskalkov for VOA News, Washington.